G'day, Stu from UAVfutures here, and today, well, we're going to be reviewing this. I don't know what happened to my voice there. Anyway, we're going to be reviewing this. Now, this is from the Flyno shop, and this is the Orion 155. Super stoked to have this frame because I've got to say I've seen all the pictures and I've done a bit of reading, and this is one of the most elegant frames I have ever seen. So this thing is designed to run 4-inch props, and it goes together sort of in a real smart, elegant way. It's going to be super light and definitely make for some crazy speeds, I think, for such a tiny little frame. And it's going to be very interesting to see how it stacks up with sort of some of its traditional X or H brothers up there. Anyway, we're going to chuck it on the bench and see what you get, and let's get to it. Now, just very quickly, it comes in a little bag. It actually came in a box and everything like that, but this is it. So let's open this up and see what we got. Alrighty, so here's what we have, and you might be saying to yourself, Stuart, yeah, that's good, but where's all the other bits that come with it, mate? And yep, guess what? This is it. So this is everything that is on the Orion 155X. Now, some of you might be a bit worried about that, but that makes me very excited. Not that you're worried, that this is all that comes with it, because it's going to be an extremely light sort of frame, because the entire goal behind this bad boy is to sort of create a crazy racer, so an ultra high speed racer. And I think I've got to say already, on first impressions and the things that I've read about this thing, they've done a fantastic job. So let's have a quick look at what we've got here. So we've got our, I guess we don't even need to call it a base plate. We've got our main plate right here. Then I guess we've got our FPV protection, or a little stack protection right here. This is where our camera will go and things like that. It comes with its own specially designed PDB, and then you got your standoff. So we're going to talk about these things a bit more in detail, but let's jump into the part everybody wants to know. Let's talk about this sort of main plate. Alright, so here it is, and I think you can probably tell some of the details about this thing already just based off its name, the Orion 155X. So it is 155 millimeters from motor to motor, and it is in a true X configuration. So each one of these arms is 90 degrees to each other, which is great because sometimes we get some more plus configurations or things like that, but it's great to see that we have a true X right here. On the outside of the arms right here, we've got some little cutouts and things like that, and it's actually designed to run 1806 or 1306 motors just here, so it's actually not going to fit your larger 22 size, but anyway, so it's designed to run these slightly lighter 1806 or 1306 motors. Now, something that's sort of going away from the trend, I think, of current frames. Current frames seem to be loading up with as much carbon as they can and getting the thickest arms and stuff like that. The Orion 155X goes actually the other way. Now, this is designed to be an ultra lightweight sort of racing frame. So this thing sort of uses the minimum amount of carbon that it can while still retaining a fair bit of strength. So it's got some huge cutouts in here, just here, to let the air pass through so it can sort of whiz through the air. And you can see here, because it's actually got these braces sort of between the arms, and I know a few frames do this sort of little pod style, this actually makes it really, really strong as a whole, as opposed to having just single arms that come out from the center, because they've sort of got this sort of carbon bracing around the outside that allows you to have a really strong, rigid frame. Now, the main plate itself is coming in at 2.5 millimeters there, so it is not the thickest frame, but again, I think it is really, really trying to minimize the weight. Now, another thing worth noting about this frame, it's got a sort of ingenious way of locking in its sort of FPV mounts, and we'll talk about that a little bit as well, but it will not fit your standard 36 by 36 size nays, so it actually has its own special PDB that the guys have designed, and you'll notice here it fits a tiny Afro Mini flight controller. So I've actually got some of those, so we'll be able to talk about those as well, but it's got some absolutely little tiny flight controllers. It won't fit your standard nays or anything like that, so you do need to make sure that you're going to be rocking a sort of mini flight controller. So Stuart, we've got our minimalist sort of carbon over here. What's going to be protecting our components, and that's where these come in. Now, these are two very, very light, and how thick are these bad boys? These are the sort of the FPV protecting parts. This is 2.5 millimeters as well, so it's all 2.5 millimeter carbon, and these are the sort of two little arms or braces or whatever you would like to call them that are going to protect your components. And they've got a really, really clever design, because they actually hook in to your main plate and then they just screw down. So you actually use a bolt from underneath to screw them into place, and we can just sit those on top there and see how they're going to look. Alrighty, I'm not sure if they go that way or if they go... yeah, they have to go that way. There we go. So that's how these, make sure they're around the wrong way. around the wrong way. Make sure they're around the right way. And then when you put your standoffs and things like there, so that's where you're going to be building. Now it's worth noting just here, I can already tell this is going to be a very tight build. So it's going to be super light, but definitely this frame would not be the easiest for beginners because you don't have very much room in here. But I don't think it's aimed at beginners as well. I think it's aimed at people who want to win races. And then finally, we've just got some hardware here and things like that. So we've got our screws, our sort of nylon lock nuts, a standoff. So yeah, pretty standard stuff with the hardware that puts it together. All right, so let's have a look at the PDB. Now the PDB is specifically designed for this frame, and I think they've done a great job, and it's going to be well protected when you put this inside just here because no parts are hanging out over the edge. So we'll have a look at the PDB with its little ports. So we've got our voltage in and our ground. You've got spaces for your 4 ESCs, so 1, 2, 3, and 4, as well as the signal wires and the ground for each of your ESCs. So the little signal wire, the little ground wire that runs next to the signal as well. So they're signal 1, 2, 3, and 4. Just here, you've got all the spaces, and this is where your Afro Mini flight controller, all the pins and stuff, the pin layout is exactly matched up just here. So you'll be able to solder it directly on top and put the pins through for a super ultra tight build. And on the back side, just here, you actually have some ports, and these run from where you put in your little Polulu. So you can have your voltage in and your ground and your voltage out and a whole bunch of little parts just here, and your step down 5-volt regulator. All that sort of stuff can run here from your Polulu. So that's great that you'll have the Polulu underneath and then your flight controller on there for an ultra clean stack. So awesome job guys to make such a tiny PDB that fits on here, and you can definitely tell that this is aimed at races because it's going to be ultra light. Now with all that said and done, let's put the thing together and see what she looks like. Almost forgot, it also comes with these little HS117 mounts as well that go with these sort of brace plates. Anyway, we'll talk about these as well. Here we've got the sort of little braces that mount inside this little plate just here, and that's going to be to hold in your FPV camera. So they're just going to screw into the sides just like that, and you'll be able to mount your camera. Anyway, let's put the thing together. Alrighty, so here she is, and I've got to say this is an ultra clean frame, so I can't wait to build this thing. It's gonna be amazing. But let's put it on the scales and see how much she weighs. So it's coming in at 39 grams. Can you believe that? That is insane for a 4-inch quad. So we should get some crazy speed, I reckon, if we can keep this build super light. All right, now we just got to build the thing. Alright, so here it is all built, and I've got to say I absolutely love this frame. The way it came together and just how light it feels. Like, check this out. This thing is coming in, can't talk properly, at 214 grams, so an absolute powerhouse. Let's have a look at the frame in a bit more detail. The HS117 fits in very snug in here, and I think these two little sort of printed plastic, flexible plastic parts in the front do a great job at holding the camera and giving it a little bit of flex, so it should be good if it actually is impacted. I really like the design it's got here in the way that it locks the top pod in. I thought that was great, and it is very crowded in here though, so if you're worried about space, this is definitely a build that can be a little bit tricky. The tolerances between the props and the actual carbon, you've probably got about 2 or 3 millimeters in there, so it is not actually hitting, it is running extremely close to the outside of the carbon just here, and at the front, actually the front you have a little bit more distance, and I can't actually put my camera down, but I imagine if your camera was flat, it might be able to hit the camera, which could be a little bit of an issue. Now, something I think people need to be careful of when you are building this frame is just here the ESCs, you really want them to be over the top of the arms, and it can be a little bit difficult when you're building and maybe you've got to have your ESCs coming out this side or over. You really want as little sort of wiring in these big cutouts as possible to allow all the air through, and that can actually be a little bit difficult to fit your ESCs in here just because of the way that frame bolts down just there. You can actually run into a little bit of trouble, so I had to use a little bit of extra wire to run around, so that's just something to take note of. And now let's talk about some things I think could be improved on the frame. So straight off the bat, I think what the hardest part about this whole build is, well, there's actually two things that I really would like to see a change in the future and see how they go about it, is that putting your pigtail in here, or you sort of need a better way to be able to mount your antenna, or at least mount your pigtail. Now, I've seen some online where they actually have their pigtail running and then their antenna hard mounted like this, but I don't want to mount my antenna because I've got like a ton of quads to fly and I've only got a few antennas, so I would much prefer prefer to be able to take my antennas off and on. So I would love somewhere where the pigtail could be securely mounted into the carbon. Now looking at this, I've had to just zip tie mine straight onto the side, and it's quite a long one, but I wish there was somewhere built into the frame, I don't know where, maybe an extra little part of carbon that went across the top just here that could be used to sort of, you could just screw directly into the top of it and screw it in. I think that would be much better than say just zip tying it down. So I'd love to see a different sort of idea on how people connect their pigtails. Depending on how you build this, the camera angle, I guess this is pretty much the minimum camera angle that I am hitting now. You could change it up a little bit and use some different smaller components in here, and I don't think this is the messiest build. It's not the cleanest, but it is still, I would say, fairly clean. But I do have a little bit of trouble. It's going to be okay for me because I plan for this build to go very fast, but if you're a new builder or a new flyer, you might find this angle a little bit aggressive, so that's something to take note of. Now I guess this is probably where I'm going to talk about my biggest gripe, and you can't really see it here, but I have to stick on this little adapter here, and that's because the Orion's made for the Afro Mini flight controller, and just like the Flownosaurus Hex, that requires an FTDI adapter, so you can't just plug a USB straight into this bad boy. You need to actually solder up your own little sort of connector and then use a little FTDI adapter, and I don't really like that the most because not everybody has one of those around, and it can be a little bit difficult. So that is something to take note if you are going to build this build with the recommended Afro Mini. It does make for a super clean stack, but just be wary that you are going to have some issues with your FTDI driver, and it takes a little bit of practice and drivers and things like that to get that working. And then another thing, just looking at the camera here, I think it might be a little bit exposed out the top. So you're going to have to be very unlucky to actually break it, but it's definitely not as safe as, say, something that is tucked away inside, say like an old ZMR or one of the Epiquads. Those cameras are a lot more protected, whereas this one is sort of on the outside. I think it's going to be okay, but it's just something to be wary of, especially I guess if you were flipping upside down doing some crazy acro and you slammed into the ground totally upside down, you might possibly damage your camera. But overall, I think this is an absolutely fantastic little frame, a little bit tight to build, but a definite powerhouse. It is super light, super agile, and if you get the right setup on here, it is an absolute powerhouse. So it is an absolute beast. Now, I actually built this thing so I could try and thrash my friends at the races, so this is going to be my actual 4-inch personalized racer. It's not going to have any GoPro footage or anything like that because it's not really suited, I guess, to a GoPro. There are little 3D printed things people can put on the top, but this for me is just going to be all about performance. So if you're definitely after a serious 4-inch racer that is going to, I guess, kick some butt, this thing is definitely what you should consider. I guess you just need to think about how confident are you at building, because it can be a little bit tricky. So there it is. There's my review of the Orion 155X from the Flyno shop, and I've got to say this is my new personal favorite 4-inch frame. Now, I built this thing knowing that it would be a little bit difficult, and it is kind of a little bit tricky in here, and I know it can't carry a GoPro, but look at this thing's form factor, its size, its weight. It is absolutely tiny, and it is a total powerhouse. So this thing for me is going to be my first choice when it comes to racing racing with 4-inch, a total killer frame. Anyway, I actually have a build guide for this, and I'll leave that at the link in the end of the video. Subscribe for more FPV related content, and as always, happy flying! Shuffle over, shuffle over. G'day!